Christmas Eve had always been sacred for Emily and me, a night filled with warmth, laughter, and the kind of love that made me believe we could weather any storm. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 9, and parents for 4. Our son, Max, was the light of our lives, his excitement over Santa infectious as he darted around the living room in his pajamas. Emily and I met in college, during an impromptu karaoke night in a dingy bar. She sang a terrible rendition of Don't Stop Believin' that cracked everyone up, including me. Her laugh was contagious, her spirit magnetic, and by the end of the night, we were inseparable. Over the years, we built what I thought was a solid partnership. Sure, we had our disagreements, what couple doesn't, but Emily always had a way of smoothing things over with a laugh or a touch that made me feel like the luckiest guy alive. Lately, though, things had been different. Subtle shifts I couldn't ignore. Emily seemed preoccupied, distracted, almost as if her mind was elsewhere. When I asked her about it, she'd brush it off with excuses, work stress, a new project, or just being tired from the holidays. But tonight, as she stood by the window with her phone clutched in her hand, there was a quiet tension about her that I couldn't shake. "You okay?" I asked from the couch, where I was helping Max arrange cookies for Santa. Emily jumped slightly, as if I'd startled her. She slid her phone into her pocket and turned to me, her smile too quick and too practiced. "Of course," she said, coming over to ruffle Max's hair. "Just thinking about tomorrow. Did you get everything done at work today?" There it was again, deflection. The way she casually shifted the focus onto me was something she'd been doing more often. I wanted to press her, to ask why she seemed so out of reach, but with Max there, I let it go. Instead, I tried to immerse myself in the holiday cheer. We watched Max put out a plate of cookies and a glass of milk before scampering off to bed. Then Emily and I started our usual Christmas Eve tradition of wrapping last-minute gifts together. She seemed distracted, her movements mechanical, her gaze flicking to her phone every so often. "Want me to help?" I asked when I saw her struggling with one of Max's toys, a complicated set of race car tracks. "No, I've got it," she said quickly, tucking her phone into the couch cushion beside her. I leaned back, watching her closely as she fiddled with the toy. It wasn't like her to keep secrets. We were a team, or at least, we used to be. But lately it felt like I was only seeing parts of her, glimpses of the woman I married, while the rest of her stayed hidden behind a wall I couldn't figure out how to climb. I shook off the thought, telling myself I was overthinking things. Maybe it was just holiday stress. After all, Emily had always been the one to take on the lion's share of planning and decorating while I focused on work. Still, as the night wore on, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. Something had changed between us, and for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I understood my wife at all. Christmas morning began like every other year, with Max running into our room before sunrise, yelling about Santa's visit. Emily laughed and pulled him into a hug, and for a moment, everything felt normal. We gathered by the tree, unwrapping presents as Max squealed with delight over every toy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Emily had always been thoughtful with gifts, but this year, the leather wallet she handed me seemed generic. I'd been dropping hints for months about a watch I wanted, and while I didn't expect her to get it, the wallet felt almost like an afterthought. "Thanks, babe," I said, forcing a smile. Emily nodded quickly, but her focus was elsewhere. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, and she practically lunged for it, flipping its screen down. "Who keeps texting you on Christmas?" I asked lightly, trying to hide my irritation. "Oh, it's just my sister," she replied, her voice a little too casual. Her sister? That didn't track. Amy lived in a different time zone and was always slow to get moving on Christmas mornings. I wanted to press her but stopped myself. Max was right there, and I didn't want to ruin the holiday. As the morning wore on, Emily became more distracted. She kept sneaking glances at her phone, disappearing into the kitchen or the bedroom with vague excuses. Each time she came back, her smile seemed forced, like she was trying too hard to act normal. By the time we were cleaning up the wrapping paper, I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was going on. After breakfast, Emily announced she'd forgotten to pick up a gift for Max's godmother and needed to run out. "It won't take long," she said, grabbing her coat. "On Christmas Day?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "She's hosting dinner next week, and I don't want to show up empty-handed," Emily replied, her tone breezy. "It's just a quick stop at that boutique downtown." It struck me as strange. Emily had been meticulous about holiday shopping this year. Why would she forget something so important? But before I could question her further, she was out the door, leaving Max and me alone. We spent the next hour building his new Lego set, but my mind kept wandering to Emily. I couldn't shake the unease that had been growing since last night. The hurried excuse, the way she kept checking her phone, it all felt off. When she finally came back, she was carrying a small gift bag and wearing a flush on her cheeks that wasn't from the cold. "Everything okay?" I asked casually, glancing at the bag. "Yep. Got exactly what I needed," she said, setting it down on the counter. "Max, let's get dressed. We're heading to Nana's soon." Her cheerfulness felt exaggerated, like she was trying to overcompensate. But before I could press her, Max was tugging on my arm, excited about seeing his grandparents. As we headed out later, I noticed something else. Emily had changed her perfume. It wasn't the usual light floral scent she always wore, but something deeper, more musky. I only caught a faint whiff as she passed, but it stuck with me. That perfume wasn't for me. After spending the afternoon at Emily's parents' house, we returned home, exhausted but content, or at least Max and I were. Emily, on the other hand, seemed unusually quiet, retreating to the kitchen to clean up. While putting away Max's coat, I noticed something strange poking out from Emily's. A folded piece of paper slipped halfway out of her pocket. My first thought was that it might be a receipt or a list for the holiday party we were hosting later in the week. But when I opened it, my chest tightened. The note wasn't long, just a few words scrawled in Emily's handwriting. "Meet you at 3. Can't wait to see you." My mind raced. 3? That had to be today, while she was out running her so-called errand. The cheerful chatter at her parents' place earlier felt like a distant memory now. I stood frozen in the hallway, the note crumpled in my hand, before quickly smoothing it out and tucking it back into her pocket. I didn't want her to know I'd seen it. Not yet. If I confronted her now, she'd have a dozen excuses ready, and without more, I'd have no way to know the truth. "Hey, you okay?" Emily's voice startled me from behind. I spun around, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just putting away Max's things." She looked at me for a moment, her eyes searching mine. Did she suspect something? "Thanks," she said lightly before disappearing into the living room, her phone already in her hand. As I heard her settle onto the couch, laughing softly at whatever was on her screen, I felt a knot of anger twist in my stomach. That night, the house was silent, except for the occasional creak of floorboards and the hum of the heater kicking on. Max was asleep, his little snores audible from the baby monitor on the nightstand. Emily lay beside me, scrolling through her phone with that same intensity she'd had all day. I stared at the ceiling, pretending to drift off, but my mind was anything but calm. I kept replaying the note in my head. "Meet you at 3. Can't wait to see you." The words burned, heavy with implication. Was I overthinking this? Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe it was a note for a friend or someone from work? But who wrote notes like that to a coworker? Emily finally set her phone down and turned her back to me, her breathing slowing as if she'd fallen asleep. I waited a few minutes before quietly sliding out of bed. I walked to the kitchen, needing space to think. The house felt different in the stillness of night, almost suffocating. I poured a glass of water and stared at the darkened windows, my reflection faint against the frost-covered panes. That's when I noticed Emily's purse on the counter. She always left it in the hallway by the coat rack, but tonight it sat there, almost taunting me. I walked toward it slowly, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. We didn't keep secrets, at least not before now. The idea of snooping felt wrong, but so did ignoring the signs. My hands trembled as I opened the bag. Inside I found the usual, her wallet, a pack of gum, some loose change. And then, tucked into a small side pocket, was a folded piece of wrapping paper. I pulled it out carefully and unfolded it to reveal a small, elegant box. My chest tightened. It was a gift, expensive, by the looks of it. I held my breath as I opened the box, revealing a sleek, silver watch with a black leather strap. It wasn't for me. The tag inside the box read, "To R. Merry Christmas." R. My mind immediately went to Ryan, her coworker, the same one who had dropped by the day before. His polished smile and lingering glances flashed through my mind. I clenched my jaw and carefully rewrapped the box, my pulse pounding in my ears. By the time I returned to bed, my thoughts were a tangled mess. I couldn't sleep, couldn't even close my eyes without imagining scenarios I didn't want to believe were true. Next to me, Emily stirred, mumbling something under her breath. She reached out in her sleep, her hand brushing against mine. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to believe this was all in my head, that the woman I married couldn't be keeping something this big from me. But the note, the watch, her distracted behavior, they all painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I pulled my hand away gently and turned onto my side, staring into the darkness. The next morning, Emily was her usual cheerful self, humming softly as she made pancakes for Max. If she noticed the dark circles under my eyes, she didn't say anything. Watching her move around the kitchen, you'd never guess that anything was amiss. But now, I saw every action, every word through a different lens. As I poured myself coffee, she glanced at her phone sitting on the counter. The screen lit up briefly, and I caught a glimpse of a message preview. "Can't wait to see." Emily quickly turned the screen face down, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Who's texting so early?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Oh, just Amy," she replied without missing a beat, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "She wants to finalize plans for the New Year's party." Amy again. Always Amy. Except I knew for a fact that Amy wasn't a morning person, let alone one to text before her second cup of coffee. "Nice," I said, taking a sip of my coffee to mask my frustration. Later that day, I decided to take Max to the park to burn off some energy. Emily declined, saying she had some errands to run and wanted to take down the outdoor Christmas lights before the snowstorm rolled in. As Max and I built a snowman at the park, I couldn't stop wondering what those errands really were. When we got home, Emily was already back, standing by the window with her phone in hand. She looked up and smiled brightly as we walked in, her cheeks flushed. "Hey! How was the park?" "Cold but fun," I said, watching her carefully. "You get everything done?" "Yep. Got the lights down, and I picked up a few things we needed," she said, motioning toward a shopping bag by the door. The bag was from a department store she rarely shopped at. As I walked over to hang up Max's coat, I glanced inside. Just as I suspected, nothing there for the house. A sweater, a tie, and a cologne set, none of which were my style. Emily noticed my glance and quickly grabbed the bag. "Oh, those are for my dad. I figured I'd drop them off tomorrow." It was a small thing, but it added to the pile of inconsistencies. That night, as Emily tucked Max into bed, I opened her laptop under the pretense of checking my email. She never logged out of anything, and I found her messaging app still open. Most of it was mundane, chats with Amy, her mom, and coworkers. But one thread stood out. R. No photo, no last name, just a letter. I clicked it, my pulse racing. The thread wasn't long, but it was enough. "Yesterday was amazing. Can't wait for next time." "Same. Let's talk soon, things are a little hectic here." My chest tightened, my heart thudding against my ribs. Yesterday? What was amazing? And why was she telling him things were hectic? I closed the laptop as I heard her footsteps coming down the hall, my thoughts spinning out of control. The messages from R had a gravitational pull I couldn't resist. Every second I spent not knowing more felt unbearable. As soon as Emily stepped into the shower, I grabbed her laptop again, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. I had to know who R was and why he thought he had a place in my wife's life. The thread was still open, and I started scrolling back. After a few mundane lines about their schedules, and how perfect something had been, I found it, a selfie from him. A man in his late 30s with salt and pepper hair, angular cheekbones, and a smile that practically screamed self-important. He was wearing aviator sunglasses and sitting in the front seat of a car. The caption? Finally got the perfect shade of leather for my car's seats. You'll love it. Ryan. Of course, it was Ryan Cooper. The coworker who dropped by on Christmas, the guy who brought her a work gift and somehow got along too well with my son. My blood simmered. Scrolling further, I hit the jackpot voice messages. My heart raced as I clicked on the first one. Ryan's voice was every bit as smug as I imagined. Still thinking about that gala. You in that red dress? I'm telling you, Emily, you could have shut the whole event down. I froze. The gala. The receipt I'd found weeks ago. She told me she was networking for work, but this wasn't networking. The next message made my jaw drop. By the way, my car's back in business. Took forever to get the detailer to match the stitching on the seats with my wallet, but hey, perfection takes time, right? I'll pick you up next time. You deserve a ride that's as good as you look. The level of vanity was mind-blowing. Who brags about their car's interior like it's a winning lottery ticket? And Emily? She wasn't just indulging it, she was encouraging it. Emily, you're such a perfectionist, lol. Can't wait to see it. Ryan, can't wait to have you in it. Soon, I hope. Emily, I'll figure something out. I kept scrolling, and the messages got worse. Ryan wasn't just obsessed with his car, he was also apparently a self-proclaimed life guru. He'd sent her a list of affirmations to start her day. I'm too important to stress. I'm irresistible to those who matter. Success is inevitable when you're Ryan Cooper. I blinked at the screen, half expecting this to be a joke. But no, the guy was dead serious. Can you believe he makes this stuff up? Emily had replied. Believe it? Emily, I live it. Ryan had written back, followed by a winking emoji. I slammed the laptop shut, the absurdity almost eclipsing my anger. This wasn't just betrayal, it was pathetic. My wife was entertaining someone who treated affirmations like scripture and spent his free time matching his car seats to his accessories. But beneath the ridiculousness, there was something darker. Emily wasn't laughing at him, she was indulging him, encouraging him, and from the looks of it, letting him inch further into her life. Emily came out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel. What are you up to? She asked, her tone casual. Oh, just checking some emails, I said, forcing a neutral expression. She nodded, heading to the bedroom. I watched her go, my fists clenched at my sides. There was no denying it anymore. Ryan wasn't just some coworker. He was someone who thought he could charm his way into my wife's life, and she was letting him. But the watch, the gala, the secrecy, what else had they done? My thoughts spiraled as I stood there, more determined than ever to uncover the full truth. The absurdity of Ryan's affirmations and the car seat obsession stuck with me all day, but they didn't dull the ache in my chest. Beneath all the posturing and ridiculousness, there was something real happening between him and Emily, and I couldn't ignore it. The next morning, Emily left early for what she claimed was a coffee date with her friend Rachel. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but now, everything she said felt suspect. While she was out, I decided to dig deeper into the messages on her laptop. I hadn't gone far enough the night before, and I couldn't let this lie. I opened the messaging app and started scrolling through her chat with Ryan again. That's when I found it. Saturday's still good, right? I'll book the place, you just show up. As long as it's after 4. You know how hard it is to sneak away. My breath caught in my throat. Saturday. Tomorrow. He was planning something, and she was clearly on board. Then came the detail that almost made me laugh out loud, almost. We can even take my car after. Got it washed yesterday, so it's perfect for the photo shoot. LOL, you and your car. But I guess it'll be fun. Photo shoot? My wife was sneaking off with a man obsessed with using his car as a fashion accessory. But this wasn't funny. The messages were clear, they were meeting tomorrow, and this time, I wasn't going to sit idly by. Later that evening, Emily was unusually cheerful. She cooked dinner, sang along to the radio, and even suggested we play a board game with Max. It felt like she was overcompensating, trying to act like everything was normal. Big plans for tomorrow? I asked casually as we cleared the table. She froze for the briefest second before glancing at me. What do you mean? I don't know. You've been out and about a lot lately. Just curious if you had more errands lined up. Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. Oh, just the usual stuff. Nothing exciting. I nodded, playing it cool, but my mind was racing. That night, while we were watching TV, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She reached for it, but it slipped out of her hand, landing face up. Before she could grab it, I caught the preview of the message. Ryan, tomorrow's going to be unforgettable. Be ready. Her hand darted out, snatching the phone like it was a lifeline. She glanced at me, her cheeks flushing. Spam, she muttered, locking the screen and tucking the phone into her pocket. I said nothing, though my heart was pounding. The evidence was piling up, and tomorrow was my chance to confirm what was really happening. The next morning, the tension in the air was palpable. Emily was up early, unusually chipper as she flitted around the house, preparing for her busy day. She hummed to herself as she packed a small bag, the same one she often used for overnight work trips. I couldn't help but notice her carefully choosing what to wear, a sleek black sweater and dark jeans paired with the silver necklace I gave her for our anniversary. You're looking fancy for errands, I said, keeping my tone light. Emily smiled without missing a beat. Just felt like dressing up a little. You know, to feel festive. Festive. Sure. As Max played in the living room, I sipped my coffee and watched Emily move about. She was glowing in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't the glow of a happy wife or a content mother. It was the kind of glow you have when you're getting ready to meet someone who makes your heart race. What time do you think you'll be back? I asked. Not too late, she replied, slipping her phone into her bag. I should be done by dinner. My mind raced as she kissed Max on the head, her voice sugary sweet. Be good for Daddy, okay? Mommy will be back soon. She waved at me on her way out, her car engine purring to life moments later. I stood at the window, watching her pull out of the driveway. I could feel the storm brewing in my chest. Today was the day I'd find out everything. I'd prepared for this moment. The night before, I'd downloaded a simple GPS tracker app onto Emily's phone while she was in the shower. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I opened the app now, my hands trembling, and watched as the small blue dot representing her car moved through town. It stopped first at a cafe downtown, one of those trendy spots that always smelled like overpriced espresso and false promises. I debated driving over, but I knew barging in unprepared could backfire. Instead, I waited, watching the dot remain stationary for nearly an hour before it began moving again. This time, it stopped at a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. My chest tightened. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't an errand. I couldn't sit still any longer. Grabbing my keys, I told Max we were going to Grandma's for a bit. My mother lived close, and she adored having him over. Within 15 minutes, Max was happily playing with his cousins, and I was speeding toward the hotel. When I pulled into the parking lot, I immediately spotted Ryan's car. Of course, it was parked front and center, gleaming as though he'd waxed it that morning. The vanity plate read RYNDRVS, and I couldn't help but scoff. Who was this guy trying to impress? I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to march inside, demand answers, and drag Emily out by her arm. But I forced myself to stay calm. If I blew this now, I'd never get the full truth. Instead, I waited. 20 minutes later, the hotel doors opened, and there they were. Emily and Ryan, standing too close for comfort. He leaned in, saying something that made her laugh, her hand lightly touching his arm. My stomach churned. She was smiling, glowing, just like she had been this morning. I watched as they walked toward his car. Ryan opened the passenger door for her, ever the gentleman. She slipped inside, and he rounded to the driver's seat. My fists clenched. This wasn't just an emotional affair anymore. Whatever was happening between them had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I followed them. My car stayed a few lengths behind, my heart pounding with every turn they took. They drove to a secluded park, one we'd visited as a family just months ago. Parking under a canopy of trees, they got out and began walking toward a bench overlooking the frozen lake. I parked a safe distance away and grabbed my phone, snapping a few photos through the windshield. It felt surreal, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. Emily sat close to Ryan, their heads tilted toward each other as they spoke. She was laughing again, that same laugh I thought belonged to me. The ache in my chest turned to something sharper, anger. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath fogged the windows as I watched them sitting on the bench, completely absorbed in each other. Ryan leaned closer, saying something that made Emily laugh again, her real laugh, the one I hadn't heard in months. I wanted to charge over, to demand answers, to shatter whatever fantasy they thought they were living. But my rational side held me back. If I confronted them here, I'd be acting on emotion, and Emily could spin it any way she wanted. No. I needed to play the long game. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app, snapping photos of them together. The angle wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Emily sitting too close, Ryan's hand brushing against hers, the way she leaned into him when he spoke. My hands shook as I switched to the voice memo app and started recording. I cracked the car window just slightly, enough to catch fragments of their conversation over the cold breeze. "I still can't believe you managed to get away," Ryan said, his voice smooth and infuriatingly confident. Emily laughed softly. "You make it sound like I escaped from a prison. I just told him I had errands." "You're good at that," Ryan said, his tone playful but with an edge that made my stomach churn. "Sneaking around. Must be exhausting." She sighed, her smile fading slightly. "Sometimes it is. But you're worth it." My chest tightened. Hearing those words made everything real in a way I hadn't been prepared for. They left the park after about an hour, heading back to the hotel. I followed at a distance, my thoughts a storm of anger, betrayal, and cold determination. When they disappeared inside, I stayed in the parking lot, staring at the hotel's glowing sign. I wanted to go in after them, to catch them in the act, but I couldn't risk it. If I walked in there now, it would be all emotion, no strategy. I needed evidence, and I needed a plan. I opened my phone and started scrolling through the photos I'd taken, my jaw tightening with every swipe. This wasn't just a one-time lapse in judgment, it was something deeper, something deliberate. I called my friend Mark, a guy I'd known since college who worked as a private investigator. "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Mark didn't hesitate. "What's going on?" "Emily's cheating," I said bluntly. "And I need proof. Real proof." Mark was quiet for a moment. "I'll take care of it," he finally said. "But are you sure you want to go down this road? Once you start, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I said, glancing at the hotel. "This isn't just about me. It's about Max. I need to know the truth." By the time I got home that evening, Emily was already there, sitting on the couch with Max, helping him with a puzzle. She looked up and smiled as I walked in, her expression soft and unassuming. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her voice light and casual. "Busy," I said, forcing a smile. "Yours?" "Oh, same," she replied, looking back at the puzzle. "Errands and stuff." Errands. The word hit me like a slap. I sat down across from her, watching as she laughed at something Max said, her hand brushing his hair affectionately. It was almost unbearable, the duality of her life, the loving mother and wife here in our home, and the woman I'd seen laughing on a bench with another man just hours ago. But I kept my face neutral, my tone even. The storm inside me could wait. That night, as Emily went to bed early claiming she was exhausted, I stayed up under the guise of catching up on some work. In reality, I couldn't stop replaying the day's events in my head, the park bench, the laughter, her words. "You're worth it." Once I was sure she was asleep, I crept into the bedroom and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My heart pounded as I unlocked it using her passcode, the same one we'd set together years ago when she first got the phone. I knew I was crossing a line, but I also knew Emily had already crossed far worse ones. The first thing I checked was her camera roll. I scrolled past the usual, a few pictures of Max, some random memes, and holiday snapshots, until I hit a series of photos that weren't meant for me. There they were, Emily and Ryan. The shots were taken in his car, the one he wouldn't shut up about, and from the angles, it was clear she'd been the one taking them. In one, Ryan was grinning at the camera, holding up a coffee cup. In another, he was driving, his sunglasses reflecting the snowy landscape. But the one that made my stomach turn was of Emily herself. She'd taken a selfie, her face glowing in the passenger seat, her smile soft and intimate. She looked happy, happier than she'd looked with me in months. The messages were next. I opened their thread, bracing myself for what I might find. Ryan: "Today was perfect. Can't wait for next time." Emily: "Me either. I needed that." Ryan: "You're amazing, you know that? I'm counting the days until we can actually spend more time together." Emily: "I know, me too. Just a little longer." A little longer. What did that mean? Were they planning something? My grip on the phone tightened as I read on. Ryan: "I've been looking into places. Quiet, private. Somewhere we can just be us. No sneaking around." Emily: "Let's talk about it soon. I don't want to rush anything, but I think about it all the time. Places. Us. No sneaking around." The words hit like a punch to the gut. They weren't just flirting or having the occasional rendezvous, they were planning a future together. My concentration broke as the bedroom door creaked open. My heart leapt into my throat, and I quickly locked her phone, sliding it back onto the nightstand just as Emily stepped into the living room. "Can't sleep?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She rubbed her eyes and yawned. "I think I drank too much tea before bed." "What are you still doing up?" "Just finishing some emails," I said, gesturing toward the laptop on the coffee table. She nodded, not seeming suspicious, and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. I watched her carefully, my mind swirling with the knowledge I'd just uncovered. When Emily went back to bed, I stayed on the couch, staring at nothing. Part of me wanted to storm into the bedroom, confront her, demand answers. But another part of me knew it wasn't the right time. I needed more clarity, more control. What did she mean by a little longer? Was she planning to leave me? Was Ryan pushing her to abandon our family for his smug, self-absorbed fantasy life? I couldn't stop the questions from coming, each one heavier than the last. The next morning, Emily's phone was left on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs getting dressed. Normally, she kept it glued to her side, but today, she must have been in a rush. My heart raced as I stared at it, debating whether to look. I told myself it wasn't about snooping, it was about answers. About understanding the scope of what was happening so I could confront her without doubt or hesitation. With trembling hands, I unlocked her phone. She had never changed her password. I opened her messages and scrolled straight to the thread with Ryan. It was worse than I imagined. Ryan: "Last night was perfect. I can still hear your laugh." Emily: "You're sweet, but don't get used to it. Things are getting harder to balance." Ryan: "You're worth every complication, Emily. Don't forget that." I scrolled up, my chest tightening with every message. There were dozens, long conversations about their days, about things he did to make her laugh, about little plans they'd made to meet when I was at work. One message caught my eye. "Emily, I feel guilty, you know. I hate lying to him. Ryan, then don't think of it as lying. Think of it as protecting something beautiful. Protecting something beautiful. My hands clenched around the phone. This wasn't just a fling. Ryan was embedding himself into Emily's life, convincing her that what they had was worth more than the truth. I heard Emily coming down the stairs and quickly locked the phone, sliding it back onto the counter. She walked into the kitchen, smiling as if nothing was wrong. Max wants pancakes again, she said, laughing lightly. That kid has one-track mind. I forced a chuckle. He knows what he likes. She grabbed her phone and glanced at it. For a split second, her expression changed, something between suspicion and unease. Did she notice I'd moved it? You okay? I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, just tired. As she started making breakfast, I watched her carefully. Her smile was still there, but now I could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. She was starting to feel the pressure, just as I was. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to take a call from Mark. He'd been digging into Ryan's background since we spoke, and he had some interesting information. Ryan Cooper, Mark said, his voice low, is a piece of work. He's been involved in 2 workplace affairs before this, both with married women. And he didn't exactly end them amicably. What do you mean? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. One of the women he was involved with had to file a restraining order after he started showing up at her house uninvited. The other woman quit her job after rumors started spreading around the office. He's got a pattern, man. A pattern. Of course he did. Ryan wasn't just some charming coworker who'd gotten too close, he was a predator, someone who thrived on manipulating vulnerable women. And now, he was targeting Emily. Mark continued. If you're planning to confront him, be careful. Guys like this don't take rejection well. I'll keep that in mind, I said, my jaw tight. That night, I lay awake beside Emily, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was soft and even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were living in 2 completely different realities. The texts, the meetings, the lies, it was all there, undeniable now. And yet part of me clung to the hope that this wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she hadn't crossed that final line. Maybe there was still a way to salvage this. But as I lay there, the weight of the truth pressed down on me. Whatever had happened, or hadn't yet, between Emily and Ryan, this wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal, deliberate and ongoing. The storm I'd been holding back was starting to feel unstoppable. The work trip had been a last-minute assignment, a client emergency that pulled me out of town for what was supposed to be 4 days. I didn't want to go, not with everything swirling in my mind about Emily and Ryan, but I knew I needed to act normal, to avoid tipping her off. On the second day, though, the client's issue was resolved faster than expected. My boss gave me the go-ahead to head back early, and I didn't bother telling Emily. Part of me wanted to surprise her, to come home and find her missing me the way I'd missed her. But deep down, I knew that wasn't what I'd find. As I pulled into the driveway that evening, the house was unusually quiet. No lights in the living room, no sign of Max's toys scattered across the front lawn. I frowned. Emily's car was in the driveway, so where was everyone? I stepped inside, the faint smell of vanilla candles lingering in the air. The house was dimly lit, save for the soft glow coming from the living room. My heart began to race. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps eerily loud on the hardwood floor. As I approached the living room, muffled laughter reached my ears. A low, masculine chuckle, followed by Emily's unmistakable giggle, the one she used when she was nervous or trying to impress someone. The knot in my stomach tightened as I turned the corner. There they were. Emily and Ryan, tangled together on the couch, the flicker of the fireplace casting shadows across their bodies. She was straddling him, her sweater discarded on the floor, his hands roaming her back. Their faces were close, lips brushing, murmuring words I couldn't hear, and didn't want to. The sound of my keys dropping to the floor was what made them freeze. Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. Ryan turned, his smug expression instantly replaced by one of panic. Oh my God! Emily whispered, scrambling off him. It's not what it looks like. I finished for her, my voice cold, louder than I intended. You're in our house. On our couch. With him. What exactly am I misunderstanding here? Ryan stood, holding his hands up as if that would somehow defuse the situation. Look, man, Shut up, I snarled, taking a step closer. Don't you dare talk to me. Don't you even breathe in my direction. Emily rushed forward, grabbing my arm. Please, just let me explain. I yanked my arm away, the anger bubbling over. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for weeks? That you've been sneaking around with this clown in my own house? On the couch where our son watches cartoons? Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Get him out, I said, my voice deadly calm. Now. Dude, let's just talk. Ryan started, but I lunged at him, forcing him to stumble back. I said, get out. I roared, pointing to the door. If you're still here in 30 seconds, I'll make sure you regret it. Ryan hesitated, looking at Emily, but she nodded, sobbing. He grabbed his shirt and shoes, throwing them on as he bolted out the door. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stood there, clutching her arms, her body shaking with sobs. I could feel my chest heaving, the rage and heartbreak coursing through me like fire. I didn't mean for you to find out like this, she finally said, her voice trembling. Like this? I repeated, my tone incredulous. So you did mean for me to find out, just not when it was inconvenient? She shook her head frantically. No, I don't know. It was a mistake. It just happened. No, I interrupted, my voice sharp. This didn't just happen. You made choices. Every single time you texted him, every time you lied to me, every time you let him into our lives, you chose this. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered, over and over again. I stared at her, my heart shattering into pieces I didn't think could ever be put back together. This was the woman I'd loved, the mother of my child, the person I thought I knew better than anyone. And she'd destroyed everything. I don't want your apologies, I said finally, my voice breaking. I want the truth. All of it. And I want it now. Emily sat on the couch, trembling as she wiped at her tear-streaked face. For a moment, I thought she'd ignore my demand for the truth, but then she looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, her voice barely a whisper. At first, it was just work. We started talking, and he made me feel seen. Like I mattered. Like you don't matter here? I shot back, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. Her lip quivered, and she shook her head. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? I cut her off. Because you've been sneaking around, lying to me, and bringing him into our house. Do you even understand what you've done? I didn't plan for it to go this far, she said, her voice cracking. It just got out of control. Her words hung in the air, empty and hollow. I wanted to yell, to scream, to make her feel the same gut-wrenching pain she'd inflicted on me. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. I can't do this anymore, Emily, I said, my voice quieter now, almost defeated. What are you saying? She asked, her eyes wide with panic. I'm saying it's over, I replied. You've broken something that can't be fixed. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed us. Our family. And I can't come back from that. The next day, Emily packed her bags. I didn't help, didn't offer to carry her suitcase to the door. She'd made her decision the moment she let Ryan into her life, and now, she was dealing with the consequences. I'm sorry, she said again as she stood by the door, her suitcase at her side. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted it to end like this. But you made it end like this, I said, meeting her gaze one last time. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll stay at my mom's for now. We'll talk about arrangements for Max after Christmas. And just like that, she was gone. The sound of the door closing behind her felt like the final nail in the coffin of the life we'd built together. Christmas Eve came, and the house felt emptier than it ever had. Max was staying with Emily at her mom's, and the silence was deafening. The tree lights blinked softly in the corner, their cheerful glow at odds with the ache in my chest. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat by the fire, staring at the stockings still hung on the mantel. Max's, Emily's, mine. The sight of hers made my throat tighten. This was supposed to be our time, our family's holiday. Instead, I was alone, trying to piece together the fragments of my life. The hours dragged on, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me with every tick of the clock. I thought about Max, about what Christmas morning would be like for him without both of his parents under one roof. I thought about Emily, about the woman I'd fallen in love with, and how that version of her seemed like a distant memory now. As the fire crackled and the whiskey warmed me from the inside out, I realized something. I'd survived the worst day of my life. This wasn't how I'd imagined spending Christmas, but it was where I was now. And while it hurt like hell, I knew I had to start moving forward. For Max. For myself. I grabbed a notebook from the desk and started writing, everything I felt, everything I wanted to say but couldn't. It wasn't much, but it was a step. And as the first flakes of snow began to fall outside, I made myself a promise: next Christmas would be different. We often go out of our way to change the script that life has written for us. We huff and puff, toil and strain, trying to chase the ghost of our ego to no avail. But once we let go of the situation, life gives us an unexpected surprise. The more persistent continue to fight against the world, but in the end they realize that they are trying to defeat only themselves. But there are also those who, after going through all the difficulties and obstacles, suddenly realize that the past cannot be returned, and it is necessary to start life with a clean slate.